Welcome to Craft Politics. I'm Joseph Lavoie.
I'm Andrew Percy.
I'm Holly Mulby-Croft.
And I was going to ask how everyone's doing, but we already know the answer. Andrew is supposed to be on vacation. He's stuck on some shitty hotel Wi-Fi. And we'll be lucky if we get one or two smiles out of him because he looks quite pissy this morning. But we're so happy to have you join us, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm not very happy about it because it's very early and it keeps freezing.
I think it's really blurred, the photo, and honestly, it's not doing you any harm at all. It looks good.
Right, get on with your little show, whatever it is you two are doing. Just do it. Come on. I got bigger and better people to go talk to, so hurry up.
All right. So Keir Starmer, as far as I can tell, it just seems like to be a never-ending story, is drowning in questions about Peter Mandelson. He's lost another senior government staffer in the middle of all of this. So just, I guess, some context for everyone. The Prime Minister fired Lord Peter Mandelson, who was Britain's ambassador to the US. Did so last week after previously undisclosed emails surfaced showing Mandelson offering support to Jeffrey Epstein, including guidance around early release. Some pretty nasty stuff. Number 10 says the new material wasn't known at the time of the appointment. The Foreign Office told MPs he was withdrawn with immediate effect. Ministers later called the appointment worth the risk, which then prompted further backlash. And the PM and his aides have now admitted that Starmer knew when he went into PMQs last week that the Foreign Office was investigating the emails between Mandelson and his former best pal, Jeffrey Epstein. But number 10 insists the PM knew nothing about the content of the emails until Wednesday evening, after insisting he had confidence in Mandelson at PMQs. So there we are. That's the context for our listeners. Why does this all matter, guys?
One of the issues with Peter Mandelson, quite apart from the really, really serious, upsetting and distasteful stuff around Jeffrey Epstein, is that he is so well known in this country. He has been around, I remember him from the 90s, and he's just one of those political figures that almost anyone in the UK will know his name, they'll know who he is. And that obviously causes greater cut through alongside the seriousness of it. But it's all around with the judgment. And it's just this constant one thing after another after another. There's a debate in the UK Parliament pretty much as we speak. I was watching it earlier on today. And the minister who's been put up to answer these questions just looks so thoroughly fed up, because how on earth do you defend this stuff? It's just so simple to a member of the public looking on to see that this is not acceptable. So it's incredibly difficult for them, because just like the Angela Rayner story, it's all really, really tangible.
Hopefully you can hear me now. I'm getting like every other word of you two, but to be honest, it's not affecting anything really. It's not like, because it's I can kind of do without any of the words, to be perfectly honest with you. But anyway, I'm getting like one or two words. So let me just give some, like, everyone knows, everyone tunes in to listen to me anyways. The key thing about this is Lord Mandelson, of course, is the guy who, with Tony Blair, created the New Labour project. So created the Labour project, which made them electable. So the whole idea of bringing him back was a bit of a symbolism of, this is a continuation of the New Labour project, not the old Labour that never used to win elections. And if it did win, it used to lose very quickly, blah, blah, blah. Great mind, absolutely brilliant mind. He's very famous for being the guy who took a seat when he became a Labour MP in the northeast of England. And the joke that went around, I don't know whether it's true or not, was that he confused mushy peas with guacamole, because that's the kind of, he's not really working class Labour. He's very definitely in a different set. But the key thing about this is Peter Mandelson has resigned from things in government now like 3 times. So he resigned within like 2 years in 1999, I think, of becoming a minister because of some loan that he didn't declare he'd either given or received to buy a property in London. And then he had to resign something else. There were some questions about his links to Russian billionaires, I think. And he was a European Union commissioner as well. He was sent off to be an EU commissioner. So he just keeps he's brilliant, but also just keeps resigning in a scandal. So maybe this is, so the bigger question here is it's kind of like it's Starmer's, judgment. And they clearly decided that it was worth the risk, despite all of the evidence of all of his questionable links and behaviors and failures over the last 20, 30 years. But the key thing is it's a lightning rod for everybody in the Labour Party backbenches who hate Starmer. This is a lightning rod because it's got everything you want, right? It's got Epstein in it. It's got Peter Mandelson's behavior. It's just, so it's a lightning rod now. So there's open talk now about getting rid of Starmer.
Yeah, lots and lots of people mentioning May next year and the various elections that are going to happen. And I think it's pretty obvious Labour are not going to do well in May next year. So when sitting MPs or other people are mentioning May next year as a point where Starmer is going to prove himself or otherwise, they already know the answer to that question.
Yeah, I've no idea what Holly just said, but a lot of people are talking about May next year. And a lot of people are talking about the elections next year. My apologies.
Well, I don't want to give you too much credit for your analysis, Drew, but I do find it interesting, your point that the PM took, I assume, to be a calculated risk. There was enough baggage around this guy, but they figured that the risk was worth the potential return, given the relationship that the UK has with the United States, and given the need to handle a character like Donald Trump, Peter Mandelson potentially being well equipped to handle that. But I think what they probably didn't calculate for was the timing and the sequence of when this has hit, which has just been on the heels of one scandal after another, one resignation after another. So it's a bit of a domino effect or snowball effect, whatever you want to call it. You could imagine a scenario where, when they mapped this out, when they appointed him, is he worth the risk? Could this backfire on us? Maybe, but if it does, we'll be prepared for that. It'll be a one-off scenario. We'll be able to point to our reestablished relationship with U.S. under Donald Trump, whatever. But now when it comes on the heels of this, that's what I think fundamentally changes the calculus for them. Not to mention that just the nature of what we're talking about here with Epstein.
Yeah, I mean, the nature of it's obviously very unpleasant. But I mean, in fairness to Peter Mandelson, he's also doing a very good job, because that's the thing about him. He's actually brilliant. He's, in terms of a politician, his ability to manage relationships, he'd gone from saying quite nasty things about Donald Trump to saying quite positive things about him recently. And we talked about him previously on here about how I think a couple of months ago, said, there's a grain of truth in everything Donald Trump says, which is kind of the problem with Donald Trump is, so much of it is kind of weird, as we've talked about before, but also that he tends to also pick on an issue which is genuinely an issue. So Peter Mandelson was actually doing a good job. And also the other factor of this, of course, is the president's state visit is, I think, next week to the UK, of which the ambassador is a key part. So just at the moment where you've got this quite controversial state visit, you've lost your ambassador. So there was a report, I think, in the Times or Telegraph yesterday saying Trump plans to go gentle on Starmer because he knows how much political trouble Starmer's in, which is not a great story for the country, really, when a visiting foreign leader feels sorry for you. I mean, that's not a great position to be in.
Is there a way for him to...
It has widened out further than just the original appointment, though. There's been so many questions this week about what Keir Starmer knew and when he knew it, and why he made the decision to go into PMQs last Wednesday and to continue to support Peter Mandelson. And I'm not privy to all of the details of that, and perhaps we'll find out over the coming weeks. But those are the perhaps even more damaging questions, actually.
And these things are always they're always difficult to explain, even if the facts are on your side and you can walk people through a sequence of events. I don't know that at this point he has the political capital to receive the benefit of the doubt from voters. And so you have both, although I think Holly was the one with the original brilliant insight on the May stuff, like upcoming May elections. How does he, between now and then, what does he need to do to even have a chance of changing the channel or wrestling back the political narrative in his favor?
He needs to do something to tackle, which is the most common piece of news that we see, or certainly on social media, which is around illegal immigration. And actually, he's had a really bad week for that as well, because this new one in, one out project that they're running has failed to take off, literally. So really difficult for him to turn this around. And some of that upset that you can see on the faces of Labour MPs, Andrew and I saw that on occasion in the previous Conservative government. That is very, very difficult to turn around.
Yes, and I think governments are always waiting for a rabbit out of the hat, right? But I don't see where that can come from, because the illegal migration thing seems almost impossible to crack, whilst we're still hamstrung by lots of the European Convention on Human Rights and lots of the legislation, ironically, that Tony Blair and Peter Mandelson brought in the early days of the new Labour government. We had the Human Rights Act, and although I think even they have now said, Tony Blair recently said, it was never intended to morph into what it has today. Migration, let's part that. I can't believe he's going to really be able to change that. Economically, things don't look good. I mean, everywhere's getting downgraded, across Europe, Canada, the whole of the Western economy seems at a bit of a stasis. So I don't think that's going to come good. They've got a budget coming up where probably taxes are going to go up and they're going to cut spending. That's not going to go down well. Well, the tax rises might with Labour MPs, but the cutting of government departments work. So I don't really see what there is. And then they've got May elections next year, as Holly had said, and including in Scotland and Wales for the national parliaments and assemblies there. And that all looks like it's going to be terrible. And now you've also got the mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, who used to be an MP and was a minister in the Blair government, openly, it seems, organising for a potential leadership push against Starmer as early as next year. So I just don't see how anything can get better for him. But it's just it's almost like, as we've talked about before, they were supposed to be the grown-ups in the room getting rid of these terrible Tories who spent the whole time fighting like cats in a sack, and now they're spending the whole time fighting like cats in a sack.
Do you agree, though, Andrew? Because I think that we saw this. There are lots of times when you think someone can't possibly go on any longer, and this is absolutely politically unsurvivable. They just carry on. It always seems to take longer than you think it will.
Yeah, I think that's true. It takes longer. And also, I think that unlike the Tory party, which takes particular delight as the Parliamentary Conservative Party in chopping the heads off its own leaders, Labour, it's not really in their DNA. So this is not something they tend to do very regularly, and their processes are a bit more complicated, I believe, than the Conservatives. So I think he's safe for now, but things are pretty bad for him because he didn't really have a lot of support to begin with. Right, he was never a great motivator of people. He's not like he's like a bank manager's been put in charge of the country. Just turns out he's not a very good bank manager. Kind of like Northern Rock bank manager before they went completely under and there was a run on them. So in 2008, so he's just not very good.
And on top of that, normally this is where you would expect the opposition party or the number one opposition party to fill the void. But as we saw this week with a defection, it seems like the Conservatives or the Tories are just failing to capitalize politically on this moment. Like there's only one winner, it seems, right now in all of this, and that seems to be reform.
This is the Tory MP who's defected, Danny Kruger. So I think Holly was a bit sweet on him.
I liked all of our former colleagues very much, as you know.
That's a lie.
As did
That's
you,
a lie.
And held them on in very high regard.
You thought most of them were idiots.
Were you surprised by Danny Kruger? I was slightly surprised. Yeah, but although I do notice that now he's gone, he's a very senior Tory MP. He's very important and senior Tory MP. I don't remember him having a ministerial job when we were there. Do you remember?
No, I mean, but it's always the case, isn't it? If you get caught with your pants down or you're shitting on your own side, you're always top Tory or senior Tory. But yeah, I mean, I always liked him, but he was from that Christian right of the party, which is not a side of the party I particularly relate to. So I always kind of just thought of him as, because he's Prue Leith's son, who is famous for the Great British Bake Off, as it's called in North America. So he's her son, and that's what I kind of remember him for, and being quite thoughtful on some of his issues. He obviously clearly thinks he's up, but I didn't really think of him as a mover and a shaker in the party. And now he's a top Tory and getting quite a write-up. But I think the more important thing here is, like, the government of the day is absolutely on the ropes. They don't seem to be able to put a foot right, and the main opposition party, the Conservatives, is unable to capitalise on this because itself is in a terrible, terrible state. And ordinarily, you would see the natural recipient of the government's collapse in the polls and in the mind of the public would benefit the Conservatives. But actually, the Conservatives are now well below in the polls where they were in the general election. So it's just, again, as we've talked about, I think before, it's the same as what you've seen happening in other countries, particularly in France, where the two main political parties, seem to just be in a death spiral, and these new forces seem to be
just like that. We have lost him. I don't know that he offered that much additional insight, Holly. So I think we just keep rolling because clearly he was just parroting whatever you.
Yeah, all right. Okie dokie. Where were we up to?
Okay, so I pulled up the announcement from when Danny Kruger announced his defection. He's on stage next to Nigel Farage, and this is what he had to say.
We've had a year of stasis and drift and a sham unity that comes from not doing anything bold or difficult or controversial. And the result is in the polls. And those lost voters aren't coming back. And every day, more and more people are joining them in deserting the party that has failed. And so this is my tragic conclusion. The Conservative Party is over. over as a national party, over as the principal opposition to the left. But I'm not.
The Conservative Party is over. It's dead. What do you think of that?
Yeah, he looks very, very serious. And I know Danny a little bit. He wasn't a close friend, but he was somebody who I saw around and I knew him a little bit. I think he was involved in setting up the New Conservatives, if I remember rightly, with a good friend of mine, Miriam Cates. He's of one thing I do question about this is the timing of it. It seems like very strange timing. Why would you not do it at the Conservative conference week, and why would you not do it during the Reform conference? I find that really odd. There's another one
Right, because we're in between the two conferences right now, aren't we?
Yeah, it just seems a slightly strange timing. They've obviously got their grid and they know what they want to do. I don't think it's going to make a huge amount of difference to anything, if I'm honest.
Yeah, okay. So you're not quite prepared to say that the Tories are dead politically?
No, because I honestly, I am a Conservative, and I think the Conservative Party is kind of a living, breathing entity all of its own, and we're the current custodians of it, or Kemi ultimately is the current custodian of it, but it will continue and change over the future decades, just as it has done over previous decades. So I'm a little bit less resolute about the death of the Conservative Party than Danny is.
Okay, well, I think I agree with that. I think it's always, politics is an eternity. Time seems to stretch forever. So you never know. As quickly as reform has had this ascent, it could also come crashing and burning. Now, crash and burn. Do I think that's going to happen by the May elections? Probably not. And reform definitely seems to have momentum and the wind in its sails. But I'm not prepared to call a party as old as the Tories quite just dead.
It'd be interesting to see what happens over between now and May and how many other people go. There was another lady, even Minister Maria Caulfield, who went over. It was in the press today. Let's see what happens, but I tend to agree with you.
Okay, well, good. We have talked at length about the UK. Why don't we move on to our next two jurisdictions? So let's go to the US. I don't think we need to spend too much time on this because there's been so much coverage of this story. But I think it's impossible for us not to have at least a quick chat about the shooting of Charlie Kirk and the aftermath. So if you have been sleeping under a rock and you don't have the full context of, you will discover, of course, that conservative activist Charlie Kirk was fatally shot last week when speaking at Utah Valley University. There was a manhunt for his alleged killer, and that manhunt was successful. They found a guy named Tyler Robinson. He's alleged to have fired from a rooftop and arrested after a 33-hour manhunt. It's obviously a high-profile act of political violence. I think made even more high-profile by the fact that it's a character like, or a person like Charlie Kirk. But also, I think the sheer nature of the act of violence and the social media effects of it as well. I mean, I don't know how you discovered it, Holly, but someone literally sent it to me in a message with zero warning about what I was going to watch. And I was like, and I clicked through, and I'm a very squeamish person, and I like shrieked because the video was just so shocking. It's not the kind of thing you're used to like seeing when you click on a Twitter link. And so I think a combination of all these factors, the nature of the attack, the visual components that came out of it, the speed with which it sped, and then who this person is and the influence that he carries, I think just meant that this act of violence captured a lot of attention. I don't know how it played out on your side of the ocean, but it certainly has been.
I found out in a very similar way, actually. Yeah. A member of my family just sent me a text message, and they had seen him on social media. And I think because he was such a public figure with exposure all over the world, there's that element almost for some people that they felt they knew him.
Right.
Because they'd had so much exposure to him. So on a human level, just incredibly sad for his family. But what it means for the security of public figures and politicians and access to public figures and politicians moving forward, it's probably going to cause some changes, I guess.
Yeah, well, you and I were talking before we turned on the microphones earlier about whether I had any interest in ever seeking public office. And I gave you my 100 reasons why I had no interest anymore. But the one that we didn't talk about was the fact that political figures now are just exposed to so much more personal risk. And it's a pretty scary proposition to think that when you are speaking your mind and doing it in a way that Charlie Kirk was, yes, did he at times say inflammatory things, but his approach to politics was to engage people in dialogue. It was not violence. To lose your life just because you are trying to engage people in the civic process is incredibly scary. I think that's also why this has captured so much attention. But it concerns me because we often hear about the challenges that we have, at least on the Canadian side, but I get the sense this is true in a lot of places, recruiting good people, talented people, skilled people to serve in elected office. I know you fit that bill. Andrew, of course, is a result of when you fail to find talented people in these roles. But no wonder, when you see this type of behavior, you see these kinds of activities, it makes it very difficult to convince your family that you ought to be getting in this line of work.
Yeah, of course it does. And I think, maybe this is not for today, but, Andrew and I can tell you the stories of the various death threats that we've had and the security that was in our homes and the panic buttons and the special alarms and sometimes the personal security we had to take with us to events. And I barely knew a politician in any party, it made no difference whatsoever, who wasn't receiving those kind of threats and who wasn't, very, very aware of that danger. And of course, we lost Sir David Amess, who was a British MP when I was in Parliament, and Joe Cox a few years earlier. Andrew was there for that. And it is increasingly something that I think people will think about when they think about going into public office or becoming a public figure. And that can do nothing but harm our democracies and everything that goes with that.
That's such a good point. We default to, at least maybe I'll speak for Canadians, we default to just a little bit of finger pointing going, this is happening in America because America has such a violent political history. America's got its love affair with guns. But the truth of the matter is this problem is not unique to the United States. It is it is a permanent threat to elected officials in the UK. It's a permanent threat that people here, elected officials in Canada, face as well. No one is immune to this type of violence. I'm trying to finish on a too sour note on this, but it's difficult not to when we're talking about a topic like this. But I'm increasingly worried that this type of behavior is not going to, we're far from seeing the worst of this. And the reason I think that is because the degree to which we become as society increasingly polarized, and the degree to which, as we talked about with Andrew McDougall a couple of weeks ago, technology enables that. People have become so increasingly so polarized in their own communities. They're only consuming information that validates whatever small notion of a micro conspiracy that they might believe, and then takes that small little conspiracy and builds on it, and it builds on it and builds on it to the point where people then become so out of tune with reality that they feel they have to take this kind of action. Now, of course, there are mental health considerations. There are all these other factors, right? But we are, as a society, increasingly unwilling to engage each other in a very civilized and respectful conversation on political issues. And I think I just don't think, I think it's going to get a lot worse before it gets any better, sadly.
I agree. I think the other side of that as well is that, 30, 40 years ago, if you held some incredibly extreme views, you might have been the only person in the town or village or area where you lived that held this. You might never have met another person ever who would encourage you or feel the same way or sit down and incite you to do anything about that. Whereas now it's just so simple and easy to find people who share those views and to talk to each other about it. And, I do think it's incredibly dangerous.
Yeah, well, we'll keep an eye on this. I don't think this issue is going to go anytime soon. But let's end on, I don't even know how to describe this. It's not more exciting. It's definitely potentially boring because Canadian politics these days is not nearly as exciting as it is in the UK or elsewhere. But hey, we do have something to talk about in Canada, which is that the House of Commons is back in session. That means question period's back and government's going to have its feet held to the fire. And perhaps in anticipation of that, we saw on Sunday evening that the Prime Minister came out and had a pretty large announcement on the Build Canada Homes promise that he made in the federal election campaign. So just to get our listeners caught up, This Build Canada Homes is a federal agency with $13 billion to accelerate construction, especially focused on affordable and community units. The goal here is to lower upfront costs, use federal lands to get these new builds off the ground, and partnering with private builders where they can. So specifically, a KPI that the Prime Minister's put out there as an early step is 4,000 factory-built homes on 6 federal sites. They are in Dartmouth, Longueuil, Ottawa, Toronto, Winnipeg, Edmonton. Interesting. Vancouver and BC not in the mix. And the Prime Minister's office also flagged a Buy Canadian Tilt, a rental protection fund supporting housing, and a partnership with the government in Nunavut. All of that to say, I think there was a recognition on the Prime Minister's part that we're now like 6 months past when really he became Prime Minister, and there is a desire to see a lot of action. And I think this is the single biggest risks he faces right now is if he doesn't have momentum in his sails to demonstrate how quickly he's moving, he's at risk of just getting the crap kicked out of him in the House of Commons by Pierre Poilievre, who's very effective at doing these things. So I think some of this was head into the first session, ticking off this election promise as being underway. That being said, I do find it interesting. I don't know how you're reacting to this, Holly, on your end, but I'm finding it interesting that this seems so Canadian to me, which is the way in which we're going to move quickly is we're going to launch a new federal agency to make sure stuff gets built. We also saw last week that the Prime Minister's office came out with a list of projects it was going to quote unquote fast track as part of sort of its nation building infrastructure projects. Most of those were already pretty much ready to launch, don't really need the government support. And so, but yet again, here we are announcing a federal agency to help expedite things. So we're going to deal with bureaucracy by introducing more bureaucracy. Now, I'm being a little bit, what's what I'm looking for? I'm perhaps not giving anyone the benefit of the doubt here, but it does seem odd to me that that is our policy solution to all our problems right now.
I watched the announcement and it was just so different to how it would be in the UK to see all of the people standing behind Prime Minister Carney and clapping multiple times. I just thought they were so incredibly well behaved compared to how that might have been in the UK. But I do have a couple of questions about this because I did read about the Canadian lumber and steel and aluminium and the stuff that's going into these buildings. And it's going to be this homegrown industrial revolution, I think Prime Minister Carney said. Is this part of the tariff conversation in any way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think anything that we're going to see coming out of the government over the next little while is going to have that Buy Canada framework attached to it, which is wherever possible, we need our own industries to benefit from this. Mm-hmm. So I think it's done well. This will be sort of like it'll be like dealing with 2 issues at the same time. It is not only dealing with the affordability issue, getting more housing starts underway, but also it's done in a way where we are inoculating ourselves from the tariff issue. So I think in that sense, really smart. And I think that the announcement itself, I think, is smart in that it has a prime minister now talking about domestic issues. And I think if he doesn't start talking about domestic issues a little bit more than he has to date, then he risks losing some of the goodwill and support that he's built up over time. We've seen, for example, recent polling numbers here come out that demonstrate that, yes, the U.S. trade Trump issue remains a factor in what matters to the average voter, but they're getting used to that. It's the new normal. And the top of mind issues increasingly are swinging back to what they were before Donald Trump sort of threw a grenade our way. And it's all those issues around affordability and housing. And that is what allowed, for example, Pierre Poilievre to be so successful leading up to last January, was his ability to speak on those issues. And I think this prime minister is getting the need to start talking about those things. So is it the right policy solution as a free market a conservative? I'd say probably not, but hey, it's something, and we'll have to see how it plays out.
In terms of an issue that appeals across the generations, housing is always something that people care very much about. I mean, any other issue where actually what you were talking about doing was increasing the supply of something that would decrease the value or prevent the increase in value of the bit that you own, normally people would be upset, but because we care so much about our children being able to buy houses and our families being able to have good quality homes to live in, it just cuts through that. So I think it's a very, very smart issue to run on.
Yeah. Agreed. Well, We'll have to see what comes next, right? So there'll probably be like some site level MOUs. To your point, there'll be a bunch of different industries that should stand to benefit during the procurement process on this. But we'll have to see how long it takes for some of these new sites to go through environmental reviews, actually get shovels in the ground. And so we'll be keeping an eye on. Also, with the announcement came the news of who the new CEO is going to be for this agency, which is Anna Balau. She's a former Toronto City Councillor, very smart, whip smart. And so we'll have to just see how quickly can they deliver those first 4,000 units. And I think if I was doing strategic comms for this government, I'd already be looking into the calendar for next year and going, when can I show up and do a visual with that first house built and me cutting the ribbon on it.
Well, my dad always used to call it the shiny spade photo. When can we have the shiny spade
Sure.
photo?
All right, good. All right, let's move on to our lipstick on a gerbil. For this one, no surprise, we are going to go back to our headline story, which is around Peter Mandelson getting sacked last Thursday. The sequence of events, of course, is that on Wednesday, the Prime Minister was defending the appointment in PMQs, what we would otherwise call question period in Canada. The next morning, Mike Tapp is on deck to speak to the BBC about the appointment. And we now know, with the benefit of time, what came next, which was after this interview, the Prime Minister's office went ahead and sacked, got rid of, fired Peter Mandelson. So it's very interesting to see the day after Prime Minister's questions how Cabinet was expected to defend Peter Mandelson and that appointment. So here we go. A lot.
That confidence. And
but is that poor political judgment? Is he going to come to regret that?
well, I haven't seen the vetting. So that's
but you've seen the emails, presumably, that Lord Mandelson has not denied. You just have to read any newspaper today or go to Bloomberg, where they've got a whole cache of them. I've been reading them this morning. And I ask you, as someone who has arrested paedophiles, do you think this man is the person, of all the people in the whole country, that should represent this government to America?
I'm really disturbed by those emails. It leaves a bad taste in the mouth. And look, all I can say really is that Peter Mandelson has put out his statement on that, expressing his
But
regret.
it sounds like you don't think he should be representing your government.
Well, all I can say is that Keir Starmer said what he said in the House of Commons yesterday, and of course Peter Mandelson expressed his sorrow and regret around this. Look, my attention in the Home Office is around deporting people who shouldn't be here. That includes foreign paedophiles, by the way.
I know, that's why I'm asking these questions, because we want to listen to what you have to say and not be distracted, I suppose, and be concerned about political judgment, about who holds important positions to represent.
Yeah, I can assure you I will not be distracted.
No, but I'm talking about the
is...
listeners, our listeners, the voters, the people who have to trust.
Okay, reminder, we have how we rate these things. 3 coats means it's been incredible comms work. 2 coats, solid effort, but still some visible issues. 1 coat, a lipstick, barely concealing the problem. And no lipstick, the pig is fully visible. This one is a tough one. I mean, the issue
Not for me,
is...
definitely no lipstick on this at all. Tell me what you think, go on.
Well, I suppose I'm coming at it from, I guess it depends on who we are judging. Is it Matt, the spokesperson, who, this is totally not in his control, probably had nothing to do with the decision-making, and now is just on deck to defend this thing. And you can hear it, absolutely. He's struggling to do so. But I found he at least didn't, I thought he did it in a way where he was absolutely acknowledging just how bad of a situation this is. He wasn't trying to blow past it. He was struggling through. And I think it's just because... as you can probably detect in my own voice, this is just such a difficult issue to talk about, and he had nothing to do with it. So I assume you're saying no lipstick because there was just no way to defend this thing.
Yeah, no way of putting lipstick on it as an issue, because like you quite rightly say, it's just such an awful issue. From Mike Tapp's point of view, sometimes you hear people go out and defend something and it sounds like they really are trying to defend the issue. And sometimes it sounds like they're being sensibly really quite careful about what they say about an issue. And for me, that fell into that category. And I can completely understand why it would fall into that category. And actually, as time then shows, he was quite right to do that. And he was very careful to get his own feelings on the matter on the record in that interview. Again, very sensible, absolutely the right thing to do. But as regards the actual issue itself, just no way to defend it. Just really no way for him to make it any better. So from his point of view, I guess he just had to get through that period of time, that inevitable questioning that was going to come in that interview, and get onto the issues he wanted to talk about, which presumably, as his Minister for Migration, was his own portfolio.
Right. And you're right. I think he was also looking to ensure no matter how this shaked up, the last thing he wanted was to have a permanent clip of him ever leaving the impression that he was okay with any of this. So I suppose from a career preservation, him making sure there's nothing on the record that would suggest he was cool with any of this, he did all right. But if the task is to defend your prime minister and the decisions that your cabinet has made and as a government has made, I think I'm with you. There's total failure.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
But brutal.
So you can hear that. All I can say, he kept saying, all I can say is, this is what Keir Starmer said, or all I can say is, I haven't seen the vetting, or he really, really, really tough job to go out and try and talk about that. Very hard.
Really tough job. Well, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. Put in that tough job because of the decisions that were made. And as we talked about earlier when Andrew was briefly on, this was a high risk appointment the government chose to make, and maybe there was a time when all of cabinet was on board with it, and but it comes with a lot of shrapnel. Awesome. Well, we had a shitload of technical issues today. We had to plow through, although probably for the better without Andrew. With
How long did we have him for? Was it about 10 minutes we had to put with him? I don't know, not too long.
10 minutes.
Maybe we should limit him from now on.
Yeah. Yes. All right. That is our episode for the week. Holly, thanks so much for joining me on this journey. We'll be back next week, likely later in the week. That being said, please, if you haven't already, do subscribe to our channel on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you want to get these episodes in your inbox so you don't miss out on them, don't forget to go to our Substack, our brand new Substack. You can find it at craftpolitics.fm. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this week. Ciao.
Thank you. Take care.